Welcome, dear men and women of culture. It is the New Year's Eve of 2023. Me and Tomo are about to go out and meet some friends to celebrate New Year's Eve. But I was committing a most regrettable mistake, playing the first chapter of Rance 5D. So join me on this review of Rance 5D and let me show you why this game broke me. At first, I was enjoying my time with the game. I still remember the moment the music hit, especially a Japanese beat, as it was hyping up the motherfucking beat. It was fun. I had fun. The art style was very appealing and nostalgic for me. It is a very 2000s anime art style. Round, no edges. Rance looks less manly, but the women do look appealing in that art style, and that is fine for me, as they are very clearly the focal point of most CGs. And the gameplay, while very unusual, was novel enough to be intriguing. I said the same thing for Rance 1. So let's talk about that right now. You do not decide where to go for most of the game, unless you are in a hub of sorts. Instead, you will be subjected to the whims of the roulette wheel. You can sort of manipulate the outcome, and by that I mean you can influence the chances for your preferred outcome to happen. And combat is not much better. You, instead of rolling a roulette, are rolling a dice, and are subject to its whims. You can once again only manipulate your chances, but not directly influence the outcome. You might already guess where this is going. I, however, was not. I thought chapter 1 was fine. It was chapter 2 where everything came tumbling down. This is where I mentioned we are on a timer. This was not important up to chapter 2, because chapter 1 was short enough for it not to matter during the beginning of chapter 2. However, we are met with a puzzle. We want to enter the castle, but we can't because of strong enemies blocking our way. So we need to get them to leave their guard post, and this is done in typical Rance fashion through obscure progression flags. Now, if we put obscure progression flags with puzzles that require you to purposely waste time on speaking with characters, long past what appears to be their final dialogue option, and the timer together, we get ourselves a recipe for player frustration. This is where I stopped trying to figure anything out in this game on my own and used a walkthrough instead. I then saved my game. Another grave mistake I would come to regret later on, because as it turned out, I didn't have enough time left to beat the chapter and got myself soft locked. I was also terribly underleveled and could not fight prolonged and repeated encounters. Turns out, I beat the first chapter too fast. I should have grinded more. Silly me. But then again, that wasn't my decision to make. Was it now? It was here that I realized this was a step up from earlier frustrations I had. I remembered a quote from another YouTube video. "You are not ready for Rance Roulette." And I closed the game. I had two choices in front of me. Step away from the game and restart, knowing that if I had bad luck, I would be forced to replay the game again, because I might get softlocked. This was it. Rance 5D had beat me. There was no way I could beat it. I am lucky, but even here my luck could also turn against me, because apparently I finished a chapter too fast. Now, let's pan out a bit. For what is about to come, we need to understand something first. Player agency is a term used to describe the level of control a player has with their decision making. Most imagine it like a spectrum. I, however, say it is more like a compass. As you see here, the x-axis indicates whether the game is linear or non-linear, while the Y is an indicator for how actively involved the player is in the outcome. Visual novels are a mostly linear genre with very little player input, while a sandbox game like Minecraft or Terraria would be a non-linear game that relies heavily on player input and thus heavily involves their decision making, which in turn means the decisions carry weight and alter the flow of the game. Most other games fall somewhere between those two extremes. The Rance series up to this point was mostly linear, but also had a high degree of player involvement in terms of combat and exploration. Most of my criticism in the past has revolved around its linear game design and the rigidity of it. Rance 5D, however, has gone from a very player-involved game to a linear story with low player involvement. I was no longer playing Rance, I was observing him. And while it might be lore accurate, it is also extremely frustrating. Realizing this finally broke. But if I had some form of agency, I could try again, beat the game, knowing that there was an achievable end. The question was how? I then remembered, back in Rance 3, I had struggled with Nos, one of the last bosses of the game, trying to figure out how to win. I scoured the internet and many said, just cheat. I, however, did not, instead grinding and testing my luck over and over again until I had the perfect run on my hands. But one thing stuck with me. There are cheats. Using the cheat engine, I made the game more enjoyable, taking back the agency that was taken from me, even if the game continued to play the same. I could use outside means to get my way with it. So, I decided the first problem was gonna be grinding. Grinding XP in any game is more often than not extremely tiring for me. Even in earlier Rance titles. Putting it on a roulette wheel and being it subjected to luck made it all the worse. And since I stopped caring, I was done with it. This little tweak, however, was all I needed. The game suddenly was very doable, mostly because it turned from a gambling stream to a visual novel with extra steps. Random encounters were dealt with easily. Progression flags were triggered in accordance with the walkthrough. And if we ever ran out of time, then I would simply restart the chapter, skipping all dialogue that I had already seen. But one question remained. Who thought this was a good idea and why did they make the game like this? Funny enough, I have an answer. Apparently, the game suffered a lot of setbacks during its development, until Tada himself decided what the game would be like, something I can respect as someone who's also suffered a few setbacks with his own projects. But as a consumer, I would be rather disappointed, and in fact, I am. Had I bought the game as a standalone, I would think they didn't try to make a fun game, but just get my money, which is absurd considering that even back then, when the game first released, it had apparently very low prices. After all, it was meant to ease the players back into the series and bring in new fans, a sort of soft reboot of sorts, as they had already published Kishiko Rance, which was itself made to give the series an ending if they would never get to finish the series in time. But I know you have some questions of your own. Most importantly, was it worth it at all? And well, not really. The story was alright, but nothing special. There was a weird horror vibe beneath it all, but nothing was done with it. I actually enjoyed the story for what it was, a side chapter in the grand story. But we have the Eroge scenes left. What about those? And well, you see, they looked good, but it was nothing we haven't seen before. There were some nice scenes with fillers, and Rizna is a fine looking character, but it is more of the same, which is not necessarily bad. It is just that the novelty has worn off, and the joke has long stopped being funny. Do I regret it? No. I'm actually pretty satisfied with beating the game that way. And it was somewhat enjoyable. It was short enough and didn't overstay its welcome, which I can't say for many other games that I've played. But is it a good sequel? Absolutely not. Making a sequel is a difficult thing. It's a challenge. Change too much and people will feel alienated. Change not enough and they will call it a cash grab. A sequel to a game has to consider a lot of things. The Rance series is known for switching things up every now and then, so a different playstyle was to be expected at some point. But this was infuriating, and I wouldn't wish it upon my worst enemies. Rance 5 gets a begrudging 3 out of 10. From me, I can see that there was something that could have been done with it. But its gameplay, or lack thereof, was too much fun. And I would recommend everyone to just skip this entry or watch a let's play somewhere, because actually observing Rance yourself is a waste of time. If I could change but one thing, however, it would either be the roulette or the timer. Remove one of the two and we are good. But both together are the closest thing to a torture device one can build without risking jail time.